It's my favourite section of the show, so I just get excited about it, Carol. I'm joined by Carol Malone, columnist and TV presenter, and Benjamin Butterworth, journalist extraordinaire. We were all together, weren't we, on Friday night? Sorry to bring our social lives into it.
No, it was very good.
Dan Wootton's 40th.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a problem the next morning because I was screaming to ABBA Revival.
But, you know, we couldn't hear ourselves. There was hundreds of people in that room.
It was good fun. It was good fun.
Now, very good fun.
Let's get on to the subject of the generation gap. Can we agree that, Carol, you are old enough to be Benjamin's mother?
I'm probably old enough to be his grandma.
Right.
Yeah.
Glad you've said
At
that,
least.
not me.
Yes, I mean, my mother's actually only 40, so...
Oh, shut it. It's me. It's happening here. Right, now, we're going to discuss, because he's the man of the moment again. We can't get away from him. Boris Johnson, was he a good PM? Let's start with Ben.
No, he wasn't a good Prime Minister.
Oh, come now. He won a big mandate. He's got an 80-seat majority. I appreciate it's been squandered, but the man's electoral gold dust.
And doesn't that show just what a poor Prime Minister he was, that he's not in post 3 years later? You know, Boris Johnson is much better at getting rid of Prime Ministers than he is being Prime Minister. I think that's his real skill. And the truth is that he managed to get that big majority, although if you put it in the context of Tony Blair, it was nothing like as popular as Tony Blair was in terms of the number of seats that he won. And
that all worked out well, by the way,
yes.
Ben. But yes.
And he managed to lose the trust of the country consistently last year until he stepped down. The vast majority of the British public, over 60% in every poll for 6 months, wanted him to go.
When can I come in and get him?
Can I
come in and get him right now?
He managed to lose the faith of his own MPs, and he managed to lose the faith of many international allies. How is that a good Prime Minister?
Boris will always be the Prime Minister who brought about Brexit, the biggest decision any government has made this century. He was the Prime Minister who presided over COVID, the worst pandemic to hit this country in 100 years. He was the Prime Minister who oversaw the worst collapse of growth in 300 years in this country. And, you know, in 100 years' time, people will talk about him as a person of consequence and interest. And it is incredible that even now, well, before I get to that, he got the Red Wall. He was the only Tory Prime Minister ever to get the Red Wall.
He did get the Red Wall.
He got the Red Wall.
And he lost the Red Wall
No,
as well.
he didn't lose the Red Wall.
The Red Wall. We don't know if it's lost yet.
But if it is lost, it's not about him. It's about the Red Wall looking at what the Tory party did to itself, eating itself alive. That's why they're not going to vote for them. But I think the bottom line is he is when I look at politics now, without him in it, it's dreary. Everyone in the Tory party who was going to replace him, or the people who were standing, were dreary. Penny Mordaunt doesn't have his character. She doesn't have his flair. Rishi certainly doesn't. And Rishi, since Rishi's been in power, he's like, people say he's the quiet man working behind the scenes. You know, he's the man, like, he's the where the hell is he man. He's never there.
Invisi Rishi. Let's bring Ben back in. He's electoral catnip. We had a former party chairman, Jake Berry. I appreciate he's a supporter. But he was basically saying, look, this is the only guy that can win the general election for the Conservatives, regardless of his critics, Ben.
Well,
he is catnip to some sections of Britain.
I mean, I think it reveals a poverty of expectations of our politicians if Boris Johnson, who is a
You've been so insulting to voters. It wasn't the politicians who voted Boris into power.
Yeah, but,
it was the people of this country.
I mean, come on, lots of people I know you don't, but lots of people felt he had the Boris factor, that he, like the beer, reached parts that others can't.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you know, I would defend Rishi Sunak or Theresa May to some extent, particularly Theresa May, because I think they are respectable. They have the interests of public office. They're honest and decent, even if I don't agree with some of their conclusions. Boris Johnson is dishonest, and I think that someone like that is uniquely unsuitable to be Prime Minister.
Do you really think, Benjamin, that the people who were pushing him out of power, and let's face it, this was a coup between Labour and Remainers. Do you really think they gave a damn about a few glasses of wine being taken and down the street? They saw all Partygate as an excuse to get him out, and they used that excuse.
Carol, I think that's really... No, Carol, hang on, let me pick you up on that, because I think that's really insulting to most of the British people.
Well, you just did it by saying that they were stupid and voting him in.
Much ruder. I didn't say they were stupid at all. But I think that's rude to the people, because most people followed the rules, even if they didn't like it. And I remember when Partygate was happening, I went round all the Red Wall seats doing vox pops for the newspaper.
I get all of that.
And overwhelmingly, people who had voted for Boris Johnson in these red wall seats were furious at him.
Yes,
you know, my late grandmother who loved Boris Johnson and has always voted Conservative. She couldn't stand
one thing at a time.
She couldn't stand him because he was dishonest, and that's what matters. That is a basic that should come before party politics.
Are you really so naive? You think all politicians are honest?
No, I think he's the most dishonest.
What I think is interesting is that, you know, recently when Zelensky came, I thought it was interesting that Zelensky spoke about Boris, talked about him like he was still PM. He was actually praising Boris, and I think that's the thing now. He is still. You called him catnip. He's exactly that. He's electoral gold, and since he's gone, you would think that the Tories would have picked up. Maybe no, they haven't. Labour's 28 points ahead, and there was a poll done last week saying
it shrunk a bit. To be fair, there was a Savanta poll last week that just put Labour 14 points ahead.
But they also said if there was an election tomorrow, that the Tories would only have 30 seats in Parliament. I mean, that would be unprecedented electoral
You do
oblivion.
appreciate as well, Carol, I think, surely, that there are some people who are put off the Conservative Party by Boris Johnson. They might be more of a kind of home counties persuasion, metropolitan Londoners, but at the same time, some people absolutely have a visceral hatred of this man.
I do know that, and I think they're the people who are pushing him out. You know, I think, you know, you've got to look at politicians for you know, their energy, the excitement that they create, and I think Boris will be talked about in 100 years as a landmark prime minister, a man who brought a landslide victory to this country.
It is a problem for the left, isn't it, Benjamin, that probably the only person with personality on that shadow front bunch is Angela Rayner. She's not going to get anywhere near the levers of power. Keir Starmer's like vanilla. People are like, meh.
I mean, I think Wes Streeting has a great deal of personality, actually.
The most ambitious man in the Labour Party.
Yeah, I think Wes Streeting is excellent.
He's not leader, though, is he?
I think he will be one day.
Right.
But, you know, I think the truth about Boris Johnson is that he's all bang and no book. So he is a brilliant speaker. You know, if I were to get invited to a keynote speech or have him an after-dinner occasion, I'd be delighted.
All bore and no balls. I mean,
yes, exactly. Oh, good phrase. I'm going to pinch that.
But I actually think a lot of people have got quite fundamental problems now of trying to pay their bills and keep their jobs and things. I think they're quite grateful for someone who's serious rather than silly, and that's what we've had. And I would just point out.
Just look at what's happened this week with Starmer. Just look at what's happened with Sue Gray and Starmer this week. Starmer has been chasing Sue Gray. How noble and how moral is that?
Yes, how noble or how moral is that, Benjamin? That's a good question.
That's a decision for Sue Gray rather than for Keir Starmer.
It's not Keir Starmer.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
What Keir Starmer has done is hired someone who is widely regarded as exceptionally capable.
Undermined. I put this to Jonathan Ashworth. He's undermined the value of the Partygate investigation into Boris Johnson. He's now caused a question mark to be hanging above it because of his appointment of Sue Gray. Was she impartial or wasn't she? That's a spectacular own goal politically.
I mean, I remember the guest you just had on, Arlene Foster, talking about how when Sue Gray was running Northern Ireland, she was exceptional and she was very fair. And so I don't think anyone disputes that her assessment of Boris Johnson was reasonable at the time.
Why isn't Keir Starmer telling us when he first started to court Sue Gray? He's been boasting for months now of how long he's known her and that he offered her the job months ago. We need to know exactly when, because that would compromise her Partygate report entirely.
But look, I think all of that is trying to find excuses to defend the things that Boris Johnson did.
No, it isn't.
We know
he was pushed out because of Partygate.
We know that Boris Johnson is a liar.
Finished 3 cabinet ministers and a prime minister. So we have to know that the person writing that report was a person of unimpeachable integrity, and now that has been thrown into question.
Everyone, Tories or DUP or Labour, said it at the time.
I think we need to leave it there. Thank you very much, my Generation Gappers. I'm, of course, back next week at 9:30. But up next, it's Arlene Foster.